750 million naira left the company's account in a single transaction. The narration on the receipt said, Judicial Adjustment, as if a court had simply reached in and corrected a number. But when the company that owns that money went looking for where the money landed, the trail didn't lead to where the court order said it should. The money went somewhere else. This is a video on a fintech company, a court order, and a transfer that even the bank now insists that it can fully explain but hasn't explained. Here is the shape of what we are going to be investigating in this video. A federal high court order was meant to freeze certain funds inside KudiWave's Technologies account and route them to a police recovery mechanism pending a fraud investigation. Instead, KudiWave says that its own record shows that the money moved twice in 4 days. According to its own reconciliation, not in a police account, but in a business account at Access Bank. Now the question becomes, if a court order names a destination for frozen funds and the money ends up somewhere else entirely, who moved the money and on whose instruction was the money moved? That is a question that this video stands to trace out. So here's what we're expecting to find out in this video. How KudiWave account got frozen in the first place and who applied for that freeze? The two disputed transfers, July 11th and July 15th, and what judicial adjustment actually means on a bank statement. Thirdly, the 50 million naira detail that turns this from an accounting dispute into something more serious. Fourthly, what the court has ruled so far and what it hasn't. And finally, why this case matters far beyond just a company's 750 million naira, how it affects you. If you follow how power, money and paperwork move in Nigeria, subscribe now because we are going to be tracking this one as it develops. To understand the transfer that shouldn't have happened, you first have to understand the restriction that was supposed to prevent any transfer at all. Back in April 2026, officers from the Police Special Fraud Unit in Ikoyi applied for what's called a post-no-debit order. That is a legal instrument that freezes an account while a case is being investigated. Several accounts were named, KudiWave's among them. The restriction was granted for 90 days pending investigation. 90 days is a long time for a company to have its own money sealed off, and it's during that window, while the account was supposedly locked, that the disputed movement began. And now the next question comes up as, why would money move at all inside an account that has been legally frozen? On July 11th, according to KudiWave's account record, PalmPay, the fintech platform holding the account, transferred the 750.37 million naira out. Then, later that same day, the money came back in. No explanation was given to the account holder at the time. KudiWave says that it only discovered this movement after the account was eventually reopened, meaning that the money left and returned without the company's knowledge while the freeze was still technically in force. On its own, a same-day reversal could be read as processing error, a test transaction, or an aborted instruction. But it doesn't stay isolated for long. 4 days later, the money moves out again, and this time, it doesn't come back. 2 days before this, on July 13th, a motion tied to the frozen account had been heard in the Federal High Court and adjourned for ruling, meaning that the matter was still legally undecided. On July 15, while that ruling was still pending, the 750.37 million naira left KudiWave's account for good, carrying the narration, Judicial Adjustment. PalmPay's position is straightforward. The transfer was executed in compliance with the Federal High Court's June 29 order, which it says directed the funds towards a police recovery account tied to the Special Fraud Unit's investigation. Now, KudiWave's position is that the destination on record doesn't match that account at all. According to its own reconciliation, the funds were routed instead to a business account at Access Bank, a private commercial account, not a police recovery mechanism. Two institutions citing the same court order, describing two different destinations for the same 750 million naira. Trust me, both of them cannot be true. So which is true? This is where this video moves from an accounting dispute into something with sharper edges. While the restriction was still active, KudiWave's company secretary held meeting with officers of the Special Fraud Unit attempting to have the account restriction lifted. According to KudiWave, during those discussions, a request was made for 50 million naira in exchange for the movement on the restriction. The company says it refused. There is no confirmed link, at least not yet, between the alleged request and the 750 million naira that later moved without KudiWave's authorization. A timeline like this rarely exists in isolation. An account frozen by a police-initiated order, an alleged bribe request tied to lifting that freeze, and weeks later, 750 million naira leaving the same account under a court order whose destination is now disputed. And that brings us to a point of concern. If those three facts are unrelated, that itself would be worth explaining. But this time, the three facts are not unrelated, they are connected. Let's see how. On July 22, the Federal High Court, under Justice Ibrahim Ahmad Kala, ruled in KudiWave's favor on the underlying freeze. The court set aside the original June 29 order and directed that the restriction on the account be lifted entirely. Notably, the ruling turned partly on a procedural question, whether KudiWave had actually been properly notified of the earlier court proceedings before they were used against its account. The court found merit in KudiWave's argument that it hadn't. What the ruling did not do is resolve where the 750 million actually went, or settle the competing account of the July 15 transfer. The court explicitly left room for criminal proceedings to continue if evidence of an offense exists. In other words, the freeze is gone, but the money and the question of who authorized its final destination is still very much open. It's tempting to file this as a private dispute between a fintech company and its banking partner. It isn't. This case sits at the intersection of three systems that Nigerians interact with every single day: the courts that issue asset freezing order, the police unit authorized to request them, and the digital financial platform trusted to execute them without questions. When any one of those three can move 750 million naira and describe its own actions two different ways, the question stops being about KudiWave specifically. It becomes a question about how much oversight actually exists between a court order and a bank transfer button. Now, if this can happen to a registered fintech company with lawyers on retainer and the resources to fight back, what happens to an account holder who doesn't have any of that? Think about it. This video started on a single line about the bank receipts and is now going to end with three things worth noting. Firstly, a court order is only as trustworthy as its execution. A legally sound ruling can still be misapplied, misrouted, or exploited in the gap between paper and practice. Secondly, when two institutions describe the same transactions differently, the discrepancy itself is the story. You see, reconciliation isn't about technicality, it's often where the truth actually lives. Thirdly, allegation of a bribe request should never be treated as a footnote to a financial dispute. When money and pressure appear in the same timeline, following one without the other tells you half of the story. This video is going to stay like this. Information is going to stay open like this about where money, court, and power intersects.